So good afternoon and welcome to everyone here in the studio, also to those joining online. This is the session on restoring lake ecosystems to deliver global-scale socio-economic benefits, and we're delighted that you could join us. My name is Tom Gilbert from University of Helsinki in Finland. I'll be chairing the discussion today, and specifically today we're here to talk about this white paper, Embedding Lakes into the Global Sustainability Agenda, which was published earlier this year by the Ecosystems Workstream of the World Water Quality Alliance. We have some copies here in the room. You could hopefully be able to find some. I have one here on the table. So please have a look if you're here. If you're online, there's a link to the document, to the open access download that's available in the session description. So the white paper summarizes the current global situation in terms of degradation of lake ecosystems and where we are with respect to restoration actions in various countries. And then it outlines a 4-point action agenda for how to move forward to achieve goals set out in various resolutions of the UN and the UNEP. And the 4-point action agenda you should also find on a flyer, which we are distributing here this week, and indeed on a small business card, of which we have several copies. Here, small action agenda here, and here we have also the QR code, which allows you to access the white paper itself. So hopefully everyone here is able to follow the discussion by also following the content of the white paper. And joining me to talk about the white paper today are some of the key players in its conception and writing. So from IHE Delft in the Netherlands, we have Kenneth Irvin and Konstantina Katsano. And then from the UN Environment Programme, UNEP in Nairobi, we have Adam Saljani. Also from UNEP in the audience, we're joined today by Nina Rasakka. She's sitting here on the front row. And Nina will also be chairing the online chat. So just a quick reminder of the format. We have this 20-minute block to begin with, during which we're connected to the online platform. And this is followed by another 20 minutes of more free-form offline discussion here in the studio. So if you do have questions during the first 20 minutes, you can put them into the chat, both from here in the studio or online, of course, and Nina will gather those questions and relay them later to the panel, or she may try to respond directly, if possible, in the chat. During the free-form session, so the second half, we're especially interested to hear from the audience here in the studio about your own experiences on some of the issues that we're raising here. So it's not intended only to be a one-way feed of information, but also that we can learn something from you. Okay, so not to take up too much more time, I would like to get onto the questions, and I'd like to start with Ken Irvin from IHE Delft. So Ken, could you briefly summarize what the white paper tells us about the current pressures on freshwater ecosystems globally and the impacts of these pressures?
Okay, thanks very much, Tom. I suppose most of the audience at Stockholm Water Week are aware of the water quality challenges we have, and also of the biodiversity challenges. And they are ongoing challenges, and they are pervasive. And one of the big issues is that we don't often see these challenges. They're not always visible, but the information we have across the globe is the relationship between multiple pressures, industrial pressures, agricultural pressures, urban wastewater, having a direct impact on water quality, and that impact on water quality has a subsequent impact on the citizens who depend on those lakes. And lakes, so there's 117 million lakes in the world. There's an economic value of trillions of dollars, and very often, because of the dispersed nature of lakes, they are often undervalued in some way, and don't feature in the political agenda to such an extent that they really need to.
You've mentioned that there are several distinct pressures on lake ecosystems, but many of these will, of course, be overlapping. And so we need some kind of integrated approach to tackle these crises. For example, climate change, of course, is impacting on lake ecosystems in parallel and sometimes in unison with other stresses. So how does that make things more complicated.
Hugely important point, hugely important, because if you take climate change and the increase of even small temperatures across global lakes, that accentuates the impact of some of the other pressures. So a classic example is how nutrient loads and increased temperatures accelerate the productivity and the processes within a lake. And so, for example, targets which have been set for water quality measures now become obsolete or outdated because the climate change, even though its small temperature increases, has a major impact on the consequence and the impacts from the other pressures.
So maybe we can move on to the question of where we are with respect to the global baseline on lake management, which is one of the issues covered in the white paper. So for example, we have these SDG indicators which are requiring or allowing countries to report on water quality and ecological status of their inland water bodies. But as the report makes clear, or the white paper makes clear, there are plenty of data gaps. So where in the world do we have good data? Where in the world do we still need data?
Right, I could open this as a question to the audience. I won't now, we can discuss it later. But not surprisingly, what we might call the higher GDP countries, they have their processes, they have their policies for many years in place. Europe, for example, and the US have regular monitoring and investment, and there is a lot of data being collected, all the time. In complete contrast, we have the global south, where data collection and data processes are really still developing, and the SDG requirements for water quality reporting really highlight this deficit. So there's a huge task in readjusting the balance between the data collection between some parts of the world and other parts of the world.
Thanks very much, Ken. This might be a nice time to bring in Konstantina, who has specialization in monitoring of water quality and ecological parameters in freshwater ecosystems. So maybe just following on from this issue that Ken is raising about the lack of data in some regions, how do we improve the capacity to monitor, the capacity to observe the changes that are taking place? This is one of the action items in the white paper that is highlighted, that we need to improve capacity globally. How do we do that? Like, how do we generate more data, and where should we target these efforts?
In fact, exactly after trying to see the results that derived from reporting of it is DG indicator 6.3.2, we clearly see that there is a big gap of data. And of course, we have to start, since we are in the third already cycle, we need to move on faster, and we need, aside from the traditional in situ monitoring, to also use other sources of information and data. So we need to employ also remote sensing, and we need to also activate the process of using the citizen science data in order to be able to have adequate data soon enough, so we can talk about even not only the changes that are affecting the ecosystems, but also measure the effectiveness of the restoration processes and attempts that are being made right now.
So you've mentioned citizen science, you mentioned remote sensing.
Mm-hmm.
What about some other potential technological advances, sensor development that could be used more widely? Is this something that you see as a way forward that will...
Every method that we can use, it should be employed. There are different methods like sensors or drones, the elaboration of drones, or different other methods that can really help, and this is what we should do. But we shouldn't also be forgetting that we have to extend our monitoring networks, the long-term ones.
And maybe just to go back a step, what type of data do we really need? What are the key types of data that are giving us information about the state of the ecosystems?
Actually, we need, first of all, reliable data. And that's why we should try, first of all, to make use of what we have and use quality assurance to see what we have. But also we have to, this relates back to capacity, I would say. We have to build some more capacity on how we collect different kinds of data.
Then I would also
So
like...
for example, when you have satellites, you can have some idea about the extent of the ecosystems, which is also very helpful in the process. But we also need qualitative and quantitative data as well.
Okay, so we generate lots of data from different sources, citizen science, sensors, remote sensing, whatever it is. But how should we store this data? Do we have already existing databases where we can store this water quality, ecological status indicator data? Do we need new databases? How do we go about storing big data and then using it?
Yeah, that's a good point. There are different data hubs, but actually there is nothing related to lakes. So there is a need for a uniform platform that can host all this kind of data, bring them together, and then, of course, be the point to consult when you need to know more about your lakes and their status.
Okay. Maybe I will jump to Anam for the next question. And we're also jumping around, by the way, on this 4-point action plan. So we had point 1, which was the building of capacity, and Konstantina has talked to us about that. I would like to jump to point 4, which is the issue of raising global awareness of the benefits of change. So in other words, making people aware that if we do intervene to improve the health of the lake ecosystems, that there will be benefits, and what type of benefits those would be. So in the white paper, there's talk of a coordinated communication campaign that is required, that would be targeted at various stakeholders who have an interest, of course, in the lake ecosystem and potentially the services of the lake ecosystems. So, Anam, I would like to ask you, who are the stakeholders who need most to hear the message about the positive potential benefits of improving the ecosystem health in lakes globally?
Well, honestly, for me, it's everybody needs to hear this message. But if we have to talk about, the key players that this message really needs to reach to, then it would probably be the political bodies as well as the citizens. The citizens who live around the lakes, they have a lot to say when it comes to using the lake. They're the ones who really benefit from the lake. Let it be recreation, let it be fishing, and so they're actually really important when it comes to sending out the information. They're giving them the information of what they can do to protect their lakes and how they can really support in these efforts of getting it to policy level, and as well as how they can support in citizen science.
So we need somehow to get the message to the people who are most interested, of course, in the management of the lake ecosystem and the consequences of that. What are the channels that we can use? What type of communication do we need to be having with the stakeholders, and who needs to be involved in the conversation, do you think?
So when it comes to the channels and the stakeholders and the conversations that need to happen, it's basically very important to use channels that are already existing. So for example, the white paper has been created by the Ecosystems Workstream of the World Water Quality Alliance. The World Water Quality Alliance on its own is already is about 100 plus members of different institutions who all have some sort of role to play in water and water quality. They already have a large network. So from the World Water Quality Alliance, if we're able to trickle this down to all our partners trickle it down to all the different players they're working with, we managed to reach quite a wide network. And the other thing is that the World Water Quality Alliance also has the social engagement platform that really is looking at working with the citizens and supporting the communities in what they do. And by them sharing their experiences as well, and be able to have, a platform to be able to talk about what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what they can do to improve, and also then provide capacity and information to their other peers. This really then brings a large network.
So we need to inform people at a global level, but also there's a lot of work that needs to be done at the local level, if I understand correctly what you're saying.
Yes.
Because I can imagine that many of the lake ecosystems that we're concerned with protecting or restoring might also be relatively small, but they might have similar challenges. So you could imagine to construct a model for the restoration or recovery framework that would then be applicable in different systems. But then it might be that you're engaging different specific people depending on where you are. That would be how I interpret what's been written in the white paper and what you've just told us. Well, thanks very much for that, Anna. And that maybe brings me back a little bit towards what I wanted to ask of Ken again. So in order to move forward from where we are with this widespread degradation, we need, obviously, as Anna has told us, we need to engage with various stakeholders on local and national and international levels. And we need to construct some framework within which we can advise for best practices. So the white paper talks about the idea of national level lake recovery plans and suggests that they could follow what we've read here to be the integrated lake management framework. So if people look in the white paper in box 3 on page 21, they'll be able to find an example of what this means. So how do you see that we can put such structures together? And will that be different in one country compared to another, do you think?
It will certainly be different in one country compared to another. The big buzzword here is integration, and we've heard the buzzword integration so many times. But when we think about lakes and we think about the expertise that is out there on lakes, it's very often, like in many other situations, a very fragmented expertise. And there are a number of really important bodies. A number of them are mentioned in the white paper. I encourage people to explore it and find them, rather than me saying specifically what bodies are there. The World Water Quality Alliance has been mentioned as an overarching vehicle, and it's the sharing of information, it's the sharing of experience, it's bringing together through in the white paper we mentioned about an innovation knowledge hub that is a vehicle for understanding the pressures, the responses, and the political solutions. All of this eventually comes down to, we said it many times, political will and capacity development at different tiers within the institutions and amongst those bodies which are players in this. And it also means the necessity, again at that political level, for governments and local authorities and citizen groups to step up and work together in that integrated way. So the integrated lake management plan is really a way of saying, well, we have these different elements, how can we bring them together and how can we engage with as many different sectors as is possible? And the white paper, of course, is not, the authors of the white paper are not going to go out and do that individually. What we hope is that the white paper will stimulate an interest so people can be their own platforms in terms of engagement at whatever tier that is necessary. And for sure, what the evidence that we have brought together is that necessity is very clear. And now we have to see how we translate those ideas and those 4 action points into changing things, because it's not just we hope it's not just another document to sit on the shelf. That's why we produced a little card so that people can get it on a QR code and actually, pass the card around, talk to your colleagues, spread the message, and we can build up something very critical here if we work together.
Okay, thank you very much. We are close to the time, so I think perhaps at this point I will thank again the members of the panel and And thanks to the participants on the online chat. Hopefully there's been some activity there. Nina has been monitoring. And so this concludes the online section of the session, and please, those who are here in the room, stay for the remainder of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.